first one, my principle would be protect your family and cherish your time together. Protect your family and cherish your time together. You never know when things are going to change. For us, it changed with Jonathan in the drop of a hat. One night we never expected it, never saw it coming. And all of a sudden the whole thing's changed. I mean, our time of active and hugs and talking with him, I mean, sometimes I go back and say, I wish I could just hear his voice again. And we found a recording of him doing something in a classroom, and I can hear his voice once again. But just you never know when life circumstances are going to change. So cherish your family. Spend time with them. Make sure they're important. That's part of what we talked about at the parenting conference. I think the next, you can see on the slide, I don't know if you can see that close enough on the right-hand side, but there I am, the proud dad, Lieutenant Colonel, standing next to my daughter as she's getting deployed. This is Carissa's deployment when she went away a few years back. And there's Lois. I don't know, can you see her face all puckered up and crying? In about 3 minutes, she's going to say goodbye to her daughter and not going to see her for a year. The next slide gives a few more pictures. Just a situation on the left. Here's Joshua, and he likes to be part of the Daddy Army, Mommy, Sister Army, Joshua Army. And so he sees us taking the picture, so he's hugging her while he's saluting with the other hand to us. But there's Jamie down there, and there's Caleb back a number of years ago, giving his sister the final hug for a year. Separation can be traumatic. And a lot of families, even today, with divorces going on and split families and stuff, there's a lot of separation that takes place, a lot of emotionalism. So put yourself a little bit maybe in that situation as you come to this chapter today, looking at chapter 18 and what's happening. Moses is getting to see his wife and 2 kids for the first time in a long time. We don't know how long, but in a long time. In that context, we come up to verses 7 through 12, and his father-in-law comes, and his father-in-law is excited because he's heard what God has done for Israel. So as you look at these verses, let's just look at a few of these verses and read them through. Then Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, and he bowed down and kissed him, and they asked each other of their welfare and went into the tent, talk about old times. And Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardships that had befallen them on the journey, and how the Lord had delivered them. And Jethro rejoiced over all the goodness which the Lord had done to Israel in delivering them from the hand of the Egyptians. So Jethro said, "Blessed be the Lord who delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians and from the hand of Pharaoh and who delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all the gods. Indeed, it was proven when they dealt proudly against the people." Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and sacrifices for God, and Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat a meal with Moses' father-in-law before God. There are times when we need to thank God for what's taking place in our life. Think of Moses' life. They had all those plagues in Egypt. He was so fearful he didn't want to go see Moses again, see Pharaoh again. He was afraid, something was going to happen. Then he comes out to the Red Sea, and now here they are in the front of the Red Sea. The people start complaining about him. There's a Red Sea there, and there's no place to go, and the Egyptians are coming about to capture them again. They get through the Red Sea, and then if you remember last week, there were 4 tests we talk about. They had the test of battle, they had the test of the bitter waters, and if you remember, what were the people going to do with Moses? What did they want to do? They want to stone him. He's afraid he's going to lose his life. Here's a guy who just taken 2 million people out of slavery, and they're ready to stone him. That's how his life was going at this point. Well, leadership's not always easy, and for him, he's recalling with Jethro 2 things. He's recalling, it says, the hardships they'd gone through and the way God had taken them through them. As we think back to our past, a lot of times we need to remember hardships. When times were hard, it makes us appreciate the good times. I don't think, I've been drinking a little bit more water. They say I need to do that for my voice from time to time. It tastes good. But let me tell you, if you've been working on a hot day, you're out there mowing the lawn. I mean, yesterday was 81 degrees, and you do some leaf raking, some mowing, and you go for a while, and your throat's getting parched, and you're really dry, and then you take a sip of water. What does it taste like? Oh, so refreshing, Sometimes it takes the hardships to help us appreciate how good God is to us. We had in the seminar yesterday, we were talking about one of the questions that they asked the panel up here was, how do you continue to help your children to grow spiritually? And one of the answers we came up, one of the things we talked about was mission trips. And one of the things was mentioned was that this was a person who had been on a mission trip saying, when I went on the mission trip, I really realized how other people lived and how little they had. I came home and looked at my room and was almost, I don't know if the word was sick, but almost sick at the stuff that I have. And they're just happy to have a soccer ball. The comparison. And here it says, with Jethro, they looked at all the hardships they'd gone through, and then the way God had blessed them. And they were blessed. I've talked, it seems, it's just kind of unusual. The last 2 days, I've talked to 3 different individuals about their life, and what's going on in their lives. And it seems like hardships have been in their lives. Something's come up. And, it's good to get updates, but it doesn't always get fixed right away, does it? But God takes us through those waters. He will be with us, and he'll walk through us. And so Jethro and Moses took some time, some extended family time, to look at how things were going. And I would point out that Jethro was what relationship to Moses? Father-in-law. We all know the in-law jokes, don't we? There's plenty of them, especially about mother-in-laws. They seem to take a lot of hits on it. But there's plenty of in-law jokes. But here's a father-in-law who added value to this family. I'll tell you, one of the things I learned when I was overseas, and I think I even mentioned it last week, that we live in a bubble sometimes as Christians. It's not a bad bubble, because we raise our children in a way that they're not as infected by all of the problems and difficulties and challenges out there. A couple weeks ago, I was able to be here on a Saturday when they had the NA meeting. I just walked through to do some work in my office, and it was the largest meeting I've ever seen. I must have had 120, 130. The place was massed, inside and out. And it was a celebration time. It was the day they were celebrating how long they had been sober and or clean. And they started, 1 year and 5 years, and some of them were 36 years, and that's a great victory. But you know what? It's an even greater victory to be able to say, I'll never attend an NA meeting because I've never touched drugs. That's a challenge. How do we live our lives? When I was overseas, I saw so many families. I counsel with soldiers and families. The kids are on drugs, or they're getting divorced, or the kid's in jail, or the wife has spent all the money. So many problems. And oftentimes I say, who can I call? I've got a phone as a chaplain. I can call home. I can talk to a friend, have them go check on your wife. Who can I call? And sometimes they say, as a father, a mother, someone. There's nobody. You cannot call anybody, because they do not have that support system. As bad as your family situation must be, we've got to try to build those relationships, because when things get tough in our lives, God's there for us. And we need to count on his blessings, but he also works through people. Don't throw away those relationships. Don't say they're in-law and forget about them. Keep making the effort. Yeah, they may rebuff you. They may not want to be around you. They may be the worst people in the world that you know. But you know what? Relationships are so important. And for Moses, this may be one of the few times he sees his father-in-law again after living with him for 40 years, but he had a positive impact in his life. And when things are looking down, rejoice in God's blessings. That song, "Blessed Be Your Name," that's so popular to sing, it then goes, he gives and takes away. And sometimes that happens. But when, something goes away, we're still going to bless his holy name, because he brings something else in. And so we have to have an eternal perspective on things. And that's where fellow believers, whether it's a father-in-law in this case, or fellow believers in the church, can help you. Can help you get through that tough time. That's why we have life groups. Life groups are a great place for you to find someone who will say, what's going on in your life? That will ask that question. You come here on Sunday morning, you share with somebody, you maybe have a person sits in your row, but I bet some of you folks in the front section, this one, have no idea what the name of the people are back in that section, which is why we have the name tag Sunday today, So you can at least call a person a first name, and maybe over time you can figure out this is their first name, and you build a relationship. But the life groups are places where you can build that relationship so we can share and support one another, and that's what Moses needed at this point. He needed someone to share his life, someone to support him. And the principle I have for you this morning on this point is to celebrate God's victories with God's people. Celebrate God's victories with God's people. Don't always look at the bad stuff. Recognize that, yeah, this is bad, but you know what? This is good. I'm going to take a risk here because Lisa and I have a good relationship, and I think she'll allow me to share. They've been going through some tough times. Reverend Mitchell's here, and I served under him. I was his music director for a number of years, but he's getting less lucid in the mind, and it's becoming a great challenge for their family to be able to take care of him. He can't always control himself and his physical situation, and bathroom facilities and stuff like that. And we were sharing a little this morning about all the tough times we're going through. But you know what? I don't know if I can speak for you. I hope, but I think you feel blessed still to have your parents there. It's better than the alternative. And to be able to minister to your parents. We talked about that a little bit yesterday in the parenting seminar. To be able to minister to your parents in their old age is really a blessing. It's a trial. It's a struggle. And yet we can be so focused on the problems sometimes that we forget that there's still a blessing. And we need to celebrate the blessings in our lives, as well as recognize that God takes us through the struggles and the comparison of the way things are. And so that's a beautiful thing. Celebrate those victories with God's people. That's what we do. The third thing we come up with this morning is leading God's people. And I put leading God's people poorly, because Moses was having his problems. Look with me, if you will, at these verses here, starting in verses 13. And it came about the next day, after Moses had this great day with his father-in-law, that Moses sat down to judge the people, and the people stood about Moses from morning until the evening. Now when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, "What is this thing you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit as judge, and all the people stand about you from morning until evening?" And Moses said to his father-in-law, "Because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, it comes to me, and I judge between a man and his neighbor, and make known the statutes and the God and his laws." And Moses' father-in-law said, "The thing that you are doing is not good. You will surely wear out both yourself and these people who are with you, for the task is too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone." Leading God's people poorly. Godly leaders don't do it just for the fame. Don't do it just for the money. Don't do it just for the rewards we get, because oftentimes you don't get any of those things in ministry. That's not the reason we do it. People that minister, whether it's pastors and elders like us, or whether it's even, if it's you folks ministering as the head of a committee where you don't get paid, or an area of ministry, or a secretary, or as leader of a Awana group and so on. You don't do it because you're going to get paid. You don't get paid, you're going to get recognition. You do it because you have a heart for ministry and you want to serve God. But oftentimes when we do that, it causes us to go overboard sometimes, because we really want to do it, and we want to do it well. And we put our heart and soul into what we say, put our heart and soul into ministry. But it can be a heavy burden sometimes because there's so much to do. Somebody asked me, "How do you know, Pastor, when your job's done? I mean, what is your job?" And I say, "To win the world for Jesus Christ." And when is my job done? I'll always be employed. I say the only difference is who's going to be paying my salary to be able to do that. But my job will never end. And that's the way a heart for ministry is. And Moses had a heart for ministry, and he went from morning until evening judging the people, trying to do his best because he had a heart for ministry. He wanted to do it. And there's 3 dangers in leadership that I wrote down here. I want to share those with you. One is thinking that you're the only one who can do the task. It's the Messiah syndrome. Sometimes I can get that way. Or maybe it's not that you're the only one that can do the task, but you can do it best. And sometimes you're exactly right. You are the best one that can do it. And sometimes it's harder to train someone else to do your job. Then you sit back and say, "Oh, they should have done this, they should have done this, I could have done this. I could have done myself in 5, especially for kids, I could have done it in 5 minutes, instead of asking so-and-so to unload the dishwasher. Now the dishes, they broke it, just let me do it myself." Anybody feel that way sometimes? Okay, we do that in business, but that's a problem in leadership. I can do it better, and we can. Mom and Dad can unload the dishwasher better, but you know what? If you keep unloading the dishwasher, you're not going to get other stuff done. If you keep on doing that task at work that somebody else should be doing or could do, you're not going to get it done. So it's not just because of Messiah, I'm the best person for the job, but it's sometimes a practical thing, and we wind up just doing it because it's the most practical thing to get done. And sometimes it's the only way to do it, because you got this much time, and you got to get it done, and you don't have the time right now. But when you run in that quadrant all the time, the urgent, critical way, it will destroy your life. The second thing that leadership is dangerous sometimes is taking the easy way out, which is related to this. The first one is I can do it better. The second one is the easy way out. I can do it myself. I'd rather do it myself because that's easier than training somebody else to do it. The third danger is that you hurt others. You hurt other people because they don't get what they need. If you do it all, the day will come when you can't do it all. Your job expands. We call it in the military mission creep. And I think all of you know what mission creep is, right? You do it here, but then you add this little task, and you add this task, and pretty soon you're doing this, and this, and now you got this whole thing, and you can't do it any longer. And if you haven't trained somebody else to take some of those other tasks, pretty soon you're overwhelmed. And that's what happens. We need to be able to find other people to help us along. We need to watch it out, because then what happens is the people don't get taken care of. The people you're actually serving and want you to help don't get what they need. Let's take an idea of you want to feed people that have needs and hungry. So you start feeding the poor. So you come to the church and say, I'm going to do that, Pastor, for you. And so you and one other person get there and you start feeding them. Well, that's fine because you have three people showing up, or 5 people, or maybe 2 families or whatever. But then all of a sudden a couple more families come in. But you can still cook better than anyone else. And you know how this thing runs, so let's just keep on going. Now there's 5 people, now there's 10 people, now there's 15 people, now there's 30 people. And all of a sudden, the very people you're trying to help, they're coming and the food doesn't taste as good anymore. Or you run out of food, because you haven't brought in other people to help and assist, where you may just have to organize it at that point. So that's another danger. And then who gets hurt? The very people that are coming there to get fed, because there's no food. It's not open. His expression at the end of verse 18 is so critical for us. And Pastor Scott and I were talking about this last week, and he said, I'll sit in the front row and I need to hear this. And I said, yeah, but I need to be sitting down there too so I can hear it. I need to preach it to myself. Verse 18. What's the last 5 words in verse 18 if you got the New American Standard? You cannot do it alone. That's why we have church. That's why we have life groups. That's why we have areas of responsibility for people to bring. It's because you cannot do it alone. So what's his advice? Well, let's look at the next part as we go on. Leading God's people poorly. What do I have up there for this? There's your principle. Starting with verse 19. Let's go on. Through 23. I call this giving good leadership advice. Now listen to me, Jethro says. I shall give you counsel, and God will be with you. You will be the people's representative before God, and you will bring the disputes to God. Then teach them the statutes and the laws, and make known to them the way in which they are to walk and to work, and the work they are to do. Furthermore, you shall select out of all the people able men who fear God, men of truth, those who hate dishonest content, and you shall place these over them as leaders of thousands, of hundreds, of 50s, and of 10s. And let them judge the people at all times. And let it be that every major dispute they will bring to you, but every minor dispute they themselves will judge. So it will be what? Easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this thing, and God so commands you, then you will be able to endure, and all these people also will go to their place in peace. He makes a recommendation. His recommendation starts in verse 19. You will represent the people to God. And that's what pastors do. That's what we as spiritual leaders do. We call it in the scriptures the priesthood of every believer. We're different than the Catholic Church in this matter. The Catholic Church says if you want to talk to God, where do you go? Confession. And who do you talk to? The priest. He is a priest. That's the way the Jewish society works. There's a priest, he goes to God. And that's the way they're working here. Today, we're all priests. We can all go directly to God. Because who's the mediator? Jesus Christ. We have one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus. We no longer need priests to go between us and God. We can go directly. That not only frees us up to be able to talk to God directly, but puts a lot more responsibility on us. Because it used to be you went to the priest to find out what God wanted to tell you. Now, guess what? If you're the priest, you're responsible to know what's in here. Because you are supposed to be able to interpret it and know what it says. There are those like us that are elders or pastors who go to school a lot of times and know it, and you can get great advice, and that's why we teach here. But we don't teach here because you can't talk to God. We try to help you. So the recommendation he gives, you represent the people to God. And then he gave them a fourfold plan, and the fourfold plan is in verse 20 there, if you look with me. First of all, teach them the statutes. That's like the specific enactments that they're supposed to do, okay? And then also teach them the laws. When you teach them the laws, that's your general regulations. So there's kind of it's not important what the exact difference is, but there's a little difference between the laws and the statutes, you know. One might be your federal law versus your local laws, or your federal law versus, and your state law versus how you should be acting in that, how you should apply that in your situation. But teach the people so they don't have to come to you for everything. Teach these leaders so that they know what you know. And then, thirdly, let them know how to walk, the general course of duty. Now, in the New Testament, or actually in the New Testament and also in our church covenant, it says walk circumspectly. Okay, how to walk. It's the everyday things of life. This is what you need to know, how to walk. And how to live your life. Character, should we say? Know those kind of things. And then the fourth thing he says you need to know is that you need to let them know how to work each specific act. So you walk, this is your character, this is how you life, but when you do your work, this is the specifics of that work. So teach them in these four areas so that the leaders know what the responsibilities are and the people know it also. Don't keep it all yourself and make them come to you for all the information. Give it to them. Let them understand what the principles are, and then let them apply it. So then the second thing he says in verse 21 is, appoint godly men to serve under you. This is critical. You have to get the right people. John Maxwell will say you got to get the right people on the bus and the right people off of the bus. Sometimes, and it's hard to say, but sometimes just people don't fit in a certain church, or a certain situation, and you got to get off the bus, if that's your situation, and you want, I'll throw out something here. If you want King James Bible is the only Bible you can use, and it's the only one that, Paul wrote it, kind of thing, which he didn't, obviously. But, that's your view. You've got to be willing to take what we have here, or you probably want to go to another church that I could recommend down the street that has that view. So there are some times where, some people may fit on your bus and some people may go to another bus, and that's okay as long as there's a bus going to heaven, But you got to get, and then the other point that they work in this is you've got to get the right people in the right seats on the bus. Sometimes, you get them in the wrong seats and they're not going the right spot, If you got the guy in the driver's seat who doesn't have a license, you probably got him in the wrong seat, If you get the person that's instructing where those seats are supposed to go and they can't add from 1 to 2 or whatever, if you have the person collecting the money for your trip and they can't, count money or can't handle money well, that's probably not the right person. So you need to be able to look at who you have, and this is important. Appoint godly men to serve under you. 2 Timothy 3 says, these are the requirements for elder. That's why we are a little bit different than other churches. Our elders go through a vetting process. They teach up here, and then we make sure that they know they know the Word of God and that they have certain qualifications. This is not like a lot of other churches which have elders who say, who wants to be an elder? You look like you're the right kind of person, and you'll represent well this faction of the church. Let's put you on the elder board so you can. That's not the way you work. That's not the way we think you work elders. We think elders must meet the qualifications of 2 Timothy chapter 2 and 3, and that deacons must also fit into those chapters. They must be able to understand, and deacons and deaconesses must follow those particular, should we say, qualifications. Here there's 3 qualifications that he gives. Fear God, be men of truth, and hate dishonest gain. And then put them at different levels. Put those that are over hundreds, those that are over over thousands, those that are over hundreds, those that are over 50s, and those that are over 10. So the person over 1,000, they're going to have how many people under them? 10. And each of the 10 is going to have 100 people under them. Those 100 are going to have what? 2 people under them. 2 that are going to take the 2 50s, and they're going to give a little close more. And then those 50s are going to have 5 under them. They're going to take them break down by 10s. Break it down and delegate down so people can have somebody they can talk to. If 2 million people have one person they can talk to, you got a problem. You got a problem. So delegate right. I've got a few things that I've put on the slides in front, and I'm not going to go into depth of this, but there's so many theories about this kind of stuff, because you need to make sure that sometimes you have the right people in the right spots, and we understand what leadership is. And there's all kinds of stuff. I got all kinds of books here. I got twice as many books at home. But let's go to the next slide. I'll show this one a little bit, because this is called the DISC. Anybody heard of the DISC? It's a personality profiling system. I was not very good at this. It used to be that Tim LaHaye put out some of the first books. It was called Transformed Temperaments and Spiritual Temperaments. And my wife read it, and I read it, and I was no good at it, and she was great at it. I said, "What's that person's type?" And she'd give me right off. I mean, I'm choleric in this sense. And so if you go, can you go to the next slide, guys, for me, please? If you look here, the choleric style is the top left quadrant, would be the same as DISC, is called dominant. It's the person that is the visionary, the person that takes charge, the person that, if you have 5 different kinds of people around the table, you'll probably like this guy as being your chairman, or this woman as being your chairman. That's kind of the visionary kind of thing. And it has some things up there that they do. And in one of the systems, they have different systems that relate to these. They call them a lion. They have 4 different animals, and that's the lion, and there are 4 descriptions of it. The person is they're direct, they're decisive, and they're a doer. But in the negative side, they got to watch themselves, because they can be demanding and domineering, which can be a challenge. And then you've got over there, you've got on the right side, you've got the I, which is interactive. In our situation, I'm probably more D. I try to be an I as much as possible and try to work in that area. My son Caleb is an I. Is the party animal, the one that enjoys having fun and is the life of the party and interact. They're relational. They're great with people. Okay, that's probably the I. And then you've got the we'll go down to the steady down there. That's Lois. There's maybe somebody great. She's not the one that comes and jumps in. She did a great job at this conference along with Crystal, but she's working out of her zone a little bit. She's the one. Well, you need this done, I'll do that. And she's the one you can depend on. I mean, she's there day and night, and will just follow through on stuff. And keeps on going, almost to the point of, death. It's the person you can depend on, that'll just be there. You have a person at the welcome booth out here. They're just there every week. They're not really super great at maybe leading the thing and organize a committee or whatever, but they're just great at you can count on them. And then there's the compliant down here, and that's the beaver. You have the otter up there in the eye. The otter is the one that enjoys. He's the interactive one. He enjoys things. Down to the bottom right, the steady one, the animal they use for that is golden retriever. I was walking the other day, yesterday, getting ready for my PT test, and this golden retriever came up. Beautiful animals. Love golden retrievers. That's why I married you, Lois. No, but anyway. And then you have the beaver down here, compliant. They're the ones that make sure the rules are followed. This is probably, Jonathan's not this. He's probably I, or maybe more the S. But you think of this, the engineer or the lawyer or whatever. They are the exact things. This is the rules, I mean, you're supposed to be here at 8 o'clock. Don't show up at 8:01, You're supposed to pay $33 for a ticket. Don't tell me you have $32.90. I mean, this is a 3-stage thing, and you didn't spend enough time on stage. I mean, they hold your feet to the fire for everything. And they're meticulous. And it's kind of funny, because as I read the D and the C drive each other crazy, they tell you. And as you look at these, so it takes a lot of work for them to get together. Because the D is saying, let's go ahead and let's go. And the C is saying, you can't do that. We don't have the money in the budget yet, you can't do that. We haven't voted on that yet, or we have to have a meeting, And they say, no, and their head exploding. But then the D will say, okay, we got to follow the rules. So let's change the rule. Now we got a new rule. and so, okay, we'll follow the rules. Now that's where we go. And so what this does is it helps explain things, and I've become much better at this in recent years. I don't know, it just had to click something in my head to understand it. But the bottom part here, Marty would say she's probably a C. I think we talked about this because it's also the melancholy. She says that's probably me, and we've been together for 26 years now. And I mean, we've done well together, And I think she's also the S because she's steady there. She's there every week and so forth. But I mean, but things can bug you, when they don't follow the rules, right? And she comes complaining to me, I can't believe this happened. I said, well, we got to look at this perspective, and she hasn't walked out on me yet. My first church, I'll give you this brief experience. I don't think this person will ever listen to this video, so I'll tell you. But my very first church, I got there, been there, I'm a young guy. My very first church, I only had two, but I was there my first year, and so I'm there, and they have a volunteer secretary, and I go to the church, and I don't even remember the instance, but I had something I had to ask. And so I called this person, and you know who the person was. They had a daughter. I called this person, and I said, it was my secretary, my volunteer secretary. I called her. I said, hello, I don't even say her name. Hello, Carol. This is Pastor. She hung up the phone. She hung up on me. All I did was tell her who I was. She hung up on me. And I'm sitting at the church office, your first church, and, I think she was probably close to a C also. I don't know what she was, but, I mean, whatever happened, I was shaking. I'm here 20-some years old, and Lois called me. Remember, she tried to get in touch with me that day. She said, I couldn't get you on the phone, because you know what happened? As soon as she hung up on me, at the church, I took the phone off the hook. And I sat there for an hour trying to figure out what do I do now. My whole life's gone. The one person supposed to help me, the secretary, just hung up on me. I'm done, And those kind of things, the interpersonal relationships have got to be, and I hadn't done anything to her. She had a young child, and she had some issues, and I just hit at the wrong time. And she was trying to call me back, but I had the phone off the hook. She was trying to call back to college. I didn't know what was going to go on. I was waiting for something to burn out of the church. She eventually apologized. She stayed for a while, and so forth. But man, it's just, and maybe that's because I'm looking at back now. Talk about the languages of love. My language of love is words of affirmation. Which means words of criticism really, I think about those a long time. They go deep, and that was just, that was just it, But all I'm saying is that when we have teams sometime, looking at some of these other things help us to understand what's going on. Can I have the next chart, guys, if I could, please? This just throws a little bit more of in a picture. These are the people that if you read about them, they'll put people's names, and this is what I thought was kind of interesting. Paul was the guy out in front, the visionary, the active, the dominant one. He was out there doing his thing. Peter, he was they claim he's more the influential one. He's the one that has the people, the personal. He seemed to know everybody, talked to everybody. He always went to Peter. If you wanted something, you talked to Peter. When Judas, when at the Last Supper, John wanted to know who's the one that's going to betray me. Did he talk to Jesus? No. Who did he talk to? Peter. Peter. Ask Jesus who that guy was. He was the interactive one. Abraham was the steady one. Just plod on. He was the steady rock that was just air and so forth. And they said Moses was the melancholy or the compliant guy. And we're going to see that the Ten Commandments. What does it say here? Teach the laws. Teach the statutes. He was the guy to maintain the standard of what you had to do. And so this one here just shows a little bit. You have the disc system. You have dominant, influential, steady, and compliant. Tim LaHaye called it choleric, sanguine, phlegmatic, and melancholy, which was the ones I grew up on, the first ones. Gary Smalley gives animals to them. So you've got the lion, the otter, the golden retriever, and the beaver. And then the Bible characters, Paul, Peter, Abraham, and Moses, that fall into those different categories. Trying to understand this, and we had a book that went through this at our last men's discipleship thing, of which Ken Brothers went through. We went through a book that took this and tried to make it practical in the church. But delegation's important. Getting a team, and why I brought this up here, getting a team is important, putting those people, but you've got to appoint people who are godly, who can get around these kind of things, whether it's getting around your personality types or getting around your spiritual giftings. You need to be able what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. The third thing is they judge every dispute, and here are the more difficult ones. The result is you will endure, and the people will have peace. My principle here is delegate what you can to godly believers who will function as a team. Delegate to godly believers who will function as a team. And then lastly, The fifth part is verses 24 through 27. And basically all it says is, Moses listened to Jethro and implemented the plan. Moses listened to Jethro and implemented the plan. My principle here is, advice is only valuable when it is implemented. Advice is only valuable when it is implemented. When a mentor or somebody suggests something, you can hear it, you can know it. I can have read all these books, but they don't hill of beans good if I don't implement them or try to put them as part of my lifestyle or try to take out what's good out of them. And so Moses did listen, and so many times we don't do that. We don't follow through, and we need to. As we come to the end here, let me just throw out seven things. I got a list there. You can add them down real fast. But burnout is a big problem. You know, how do you avoid burnout? How do you minister in your heart thing without getting burned out about stuff? And I've got seven things I'm going to throw out here real fast. One is work in the area of your passion and gifting. You know, if you hate finances, don't volunteer to be treasurer of the church. You know, if you hate buildings and like me, you can't hammer a nail in straight, don't volunteer to be the head of building and grounds. Now you could be head of building and grounds because you can direct other people to do it, because that might be great, but don't be part of that team if that's not your work. Work in the area of your passion and your gifting. Secondly, don't go it alone. Don't go it alone. Accept help. Even seek help. Third, allow margin in your job, in your life. Allow margin in your life. And this one I probably should not have included because this is one of the hardest things I do. You know, when you're trying to get something, leave, and I've been much better at it. Leave 10 minutes early so that if something goes wrong, you're not biting your finger, I'm going to be late. You know, when you're getting a project done, get enough in advance, think far enough in advance so you're not trying to do it at the last second. You know, sometimes that's important. Sometimes that's the way you're doing it. But try to put margin in your life. Keep your priorities straight: faith, family, and work. You know, when you get those mixed up, things get messed up. You can put your work ahead of your family, and then you lose your family, and now you don't have anybody to work for. You know, it's done. Keep your priorities straight. Have fun. Enjoy yourself. Plan fun if you need to. I had 12 sects. It's called prep marriage seminar for the Army, and there's 12 sections. The one section that was the shortest but hit me the hardest was fun. Have fun in your marriage. This statement: no couple ever got a divorce who was having fun. I think that's true, you know? And the same thing in life: have fun. If you don't have any fun in your life, you know, you're going to head towards burnout. Embrace variety. Don't get into a rut. Embrace variety. Don't do everything just one thing. Do things differently. You know, add some variety in your life so you're not just focused on one thing, the mundane and just draining you all the time. And then lastly, teach others to do your job. And that's from 2 Timothy 2:2. Let faithful men teach others so they can teach others also. You got to go down to the next level. Disciple and mentor godly leadership to serve God's people. Disciple and mentor godly leadership to serve God's people. That's what this whole chapter is about. Not just for me, not just for the other pastors or elders, but for you, at your work, in your family, at the church. If you're in leadership, train someone else. If you're not being trained for a job in this church, you need to find a job to be trained with. You need to be doing a job. If you're not a member, you need to be baptized, and you need to say, I'm a part of this team. Do it. Take that step. And then find a place else if you can, the next level up. But there's a lot of places you don't even have to be a member you can serve at. Find a place where you can be one of those that's being trained. So the person in leadership saying, I can't find anybody to do my job or to train. They're probably sitting right here. Because who are the ministers? Thank you. Dear Lord, we thank you for your love for us. As we go forward serving you, we thank you that we see failures in leadership such as Moses, where they do leadership, but they do it poorly. And we can take these lessons and use them ourselves in order to advance not only our own lives, not only our families' lives, but also our church life, and be able to reach more people for Jesus Christ as we serve you better. In Jesus' name, amen.